Good evening. This regular meeting of Independent School District 535 School Board is called to order at 5:33 p.m. Tuesday, January 18th, 2022 in room 137 of the Edison Building. Interested members of the public are welcome and encouraged to view this meeting remotely at youtube.com/ISD535, where the live stream video may be found. The board acknowledges this site and all RPS sites are situated on the ancestral land of the Dakota people, and we honor the Dakota nations and the sacred land of all Indigenous peoples. Present at this meeting are school board members, two of them virtually. Virtually, but apparently they don't like me. Superintendent Kent Pickell, a non-voting ex officio member, and Assistant School Board Clerk, Ms. Michelle Severson. Ms. Severson, will you please call the roll, and board members Workman and Amundson? We think you may not be able to, we may not be able to hear you, so if you're here when your name is called, will you raise your hand?
Director Amundson. That hand raise is a here. Clerk Barlow.
Here.
Director Garcia.
Here.
Treasurer McLaughlin. Chair Marvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Nathan.
Here.
And Director Workman. With another show of hands, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we provide an opportunity to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Edison Building is an RPS building and a public facility, so if you choose to attend a meeting here rather than view the live stream at home or elsewhere, you need to wear an effective mask, and we so appreciate that all of you here are doing just that. We also remind you that this is a business meeting, and although you certainly may record the proceedings, attendees cannot position themselves in such a way as to disrupt the business of this meeting. We appreciate organizations, including our media organizations, who attend regularly and respect the importance of that protocol. 2.0, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, except we've lost our two remote board members. Okay.
They're back.
And they're back, okay. Ms. Severson, roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Director Amundson. Raise of hands, thank you. Clerk Barlow.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Treasurer McLaughlin. Chair Marvin.
Aye.
Vice Chair Nathan.
Aye.
And Director Workman. Another show of hands, thank you.
Agenda is approved. Comments to the board. Hearing different perspectives is important and it's healthy. What's not healthy, nor productive, nor legal, is to use this time to launch personal attacks against individuals. We will remind you that there are a number of city, state, and federal regulations over which school boards have no control, and this is not a venue to express your perspective about those. We absolutely want to hear from you about existential issues that the school district can control. We support your First Amendment rights to agree, disagree, or offer an alternative to actual district initiatives. And if you have a question you want answered, please let us know and we will be happy to ensure that the appropriate person gets in touch with you. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. We ask you to respect this limit. When your name is called, please have a seat in front of the microphone at this table. State your name and whether you are a resident of this school district. As we have explained before, if you prefer to remove your mask while you're sitting at the table facing the board, you may do so for 3 minutes. Today we have 2 speakers, and the first one, I'll apologize in advance if I pronounce your name wrong. Karen Sharon. Public Schools Foundation grants. Dr. Piquel.
Dr. Marvin and directors of the board, this is a really fun time of year when we get to recognize those who have been recognized by our local schools foundation. The Rochester Public Schools Foundation is one of many jewels that I've discovered in this community. Was proud to make a personal contribution to that work, and I encourage anybody else who's so inclined to do that. But that's not our focus today. I want to recognize Justin Cook, who's the grant committee co-chair for the foundation, to come up and give us a chance to hear about the work they're doing. I believe he's accompanied by Reese Rutherford, who's our student representative. We haven't had the privilege of meeting, but this is really an honor for us to have a chance to thank you for supporting our students. Justin and Reese.
Thank you so much. Oh, look at that. And was there something I was supposed to do to make this visible? Or?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
They should do it in the back. Yep,
Okay.
see, you're good. They'll switch it over in the back.
Okay, perfect. There we go. Okay. So yes, we are honored to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Piquel. We're here to recognize the fall winter 2021-22 grant recipients at the Public School Foundation. And just very briefly, reminder about the Rochester Public School Foundation. We're a nonprofit community foundation that connects the community and our schools to advance and inspire educational opportunities for all students. Our main activity is awarding grants to support innovative enhancements to curriculum that might otherwise not occur due to limited resources. Since 1988, RPSF has awarded over $550,000 in grants to fund innovative educational experiential programming within our schools that are dreamed up by RPS staff. These funds come from personal and business donations, including school district payroll deductions, which we continue to be grateful for. Our annual fundraiser, Boo Fest, this past year replaced by a series of drive-in movie nights and other fundraisers. And then importantly, established memorial funds. This year, we are really excited for the first time in a while, we are announcing a new established memorial fund, the Mary Lou Sebesta Warren Fund. This was established just this past year in 2021 by the family of Mary Lou Sebesta Warren to provide support for the areas of greatest need in any given year identified by the Board of Directors of the Public School Foundation. The family was very interested in spending these funds quickly in a way that they could have maximal impact. It was established with the largest initial gift of any established fund in the more than 30-year history of RPSF. We're obviously very excited to have these additional resources to deploy within our schools for the benefit of our students. Mary Lou Sebesta Warren was a longtime beloved public education teacher in Rochester, spending many years at Golden Hill Elementary. Reese will highlight some of the other established funds that the Rochester Public School Foundation administers funding from. In this past grant cycle, we were able to award $13,296.28 to fund 8 innovative projects. This is an increase over past funding levels, in large part due to the Mary Lou Sebesta Warren Fund. Grants were part of the fall-winter 2021 grant cycle, which received 12 applications from district staff. The 8 projects were selected by our grant committee that sought input from a diverse group of volunteer grant scorers. Among other criteria, successful applications must demonstrate positive long-term impacts that align with the mission of RPS, including emphasizing projects that benefit historically underrepresented communities. Projects were also asked to follow up with a brief report to indicate how the project went with photos so that we could capture those learnings. And this is an example of a project from the past at John Adams using the Sphero robots. These are these little blue light up balls that you see kind of moving between the paths that are drawn in masking tape there on the carpet. Some reflections from the project director for these 8th graders said that the students in 8th grade absolutely loved getting the opportunity to use them this quarter. I cannot wait to use them again next quarter. It's a reusable piece of infrastructure. The coding skills they have gained using the Sphere robots greatly helped when we were using our software called Robot C. As a teacher, I feel so much better knowing my students gain the coding skills before they leave me at the end of the quarter, unlike last year without the Sphere robots. We couldn't have done it without you. Now, I am going to turn this over to Reese, who's going to take us through our grant recipients. And for the grant recipients that are in attendance, come right on up here, and I'm going to take your picture. And after Reese introduces you, make sure you take an opportunity to pose with your certificate facing outward.
So our first grant recipient is Lisa Becker, and she's from John Marshall High School, and she organized a visit with Dr. Green on a graphic and digital arts class, and this grant was made possible by Jacqueline B. Goodyear Fund for the Fine Arts. And you're free to share about your project.
So, a few years ago, we were rebranded for Rochester Public School, and it's this graphic designer who I'm getting to come in, Lee Green of Lee Green of Greenhouse Graphics is going to be coming in for my graphic arts students, and he owns the first and only Black-owned graphic design company in Rochester. And with this grant, Mr. Green will visit my upper level graphic arts students and take them through the design process for several days. The designs that we create with him will be printed and cut with vinyl and printed on items for students to actually wear. So we'll be able to use this for years to come. Thank you.
Yeah. And our next grant goes to Julie McLaren, Chris Davidson, Heidi Howe, and Amy Hughes at Gage Elementary. And their project title is Gage Discovery Time.
Our Gage Discovery Time is a daily opportunity for students to explore their interests at a deep level. Students get to choose from a variety of categories, and with that student choice, they get to dive in deep and expand their learning opportunities. And we're hoping that when students are given the time and the resources to dig into these topics, that you'll be able to see what they can achieve. So we are very excited about our Discovery Time opportunity.
Our next grant goes to Jenna Sir, Chris Reed, Amy Dyer, Jennifer Reynolds, Lori Shep, Laura Jacobs, and Paige Butler at Gibbs Elementary, and their title is Perspective Through Picture Books.
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm one of the kindergarten teachers, and our project funds are going to be used to purchase multicultural texts that will supplement our reading curriculum. We wanted our students to be able to see themselves in the books that we're reading and studying so that they can really have a greater appreciation for their own cultural identity and respect and appreciate the identity of their peers. So we're really excited to be bringing these texts into our classroom, and we're really excited about the deep conversations we're going to be able to have with our students surrounding these texts. So thank you very much.
Our next grant goes to Amanda Lambert and Lisa Higgs at Riverside Elementary, and the title of their grant is the STEM Mentor Lab.
Kurt, something came up here that we don't want.
And I will share a little bit about it. So the students will participate in a STEM-based learning experience for 3 weeks alongside a scientific researcher, and then participate in a Riverside Science Fair during the school day. This experience will prepare them for a hopeful future, continuous entry and participation into the Gateway Science Fair, and ultimately the Rochester Regional Science Fair. The next grant goes to Vaughn Clayton, Lita Casper, and Sarah Holger at Riverside Elementary. And the title of their grant is the Riverside Shelter.
Hi, thanks for having us. Riverside plans to build a small covered outdoor shelter as we continue to provide access, opportunity, and value of the natural world while students reap the many health benefits associated with the outdoors. We have engaged several community partners in this project, including the DNR and other committed volunteers. While this covered structure will provide classes protection from the many Minnesota elements, we also see it as a highly engaging learning opportunity to expand on standards, curriculum, and real-world application. Our students will work with volunteers remotely to design and build these little model structures of their own to inform our final product, which will be built on Riverside's own DNR designated school forest in the spring of 2022.
And Sarah Holker couldn't be here today, but she'd like me to read a little note from herself. DNR Naturalist. This project demonstrates the staff and families are committed to building a strong outdoor learning program. The Department of Natural Resources is excited to keep growing our partnership and help provide meaningful outdoor learning opportunities and experiences for students and families at Riverside, and thank you for your support.
And our next grant goes to Natalia Benjamin at Century High School, and the title of her grant is The Value of Telling Our Stories. And a quick summary is stories are a powerful way to connect with each other as individuals. They allow us to get to know each other and to develop empathy as we learn about each other's lived experiences. Through writing, multilingual students in high school engage in developing language skills at the same time that they build personal identities and a better understanding of each other. Publishing their stories helps our students see their value, and it allows their families to feel seen, inspired, and empowered. And this grant award was made possible by the Joel E. Lumen Memorial Fund. The next grant goes to Sveta Patel and Nicole Wibstead from Rochester ALC, and the title of their grant is Bringing Extracurricular Activities into the School Day.
The funding that we've been awarded will support our experiential learning happening on student-centered Wednesdays at the Rochester ALC. Currently on Wednesdays, we offer an alternate credit-based elective schedule to our students in collaboration with many of our full-service community schools established partners. And this is not an exhaustive list, but to give you an idea of who's been participating in our partnerships, the Boys and Girls Club, Channel 1, Post Bulletin, Sombra Valley, Vita Tax Preparers, Diversity Council, and others have offered classes to our students, such as Adulting 101, Growing Up Black, Tax Preparation, Poetry Slam, Writing for an Audience, Student Resiliency and Mental Health, and other opportunities to students that would not otherwise receive them. Using this funding, our staff are going to continue expanding innovative offerings for our students with the support of the funding that we received through the foundation. We thank you very much for your support.
Our next grant goes to Cheryl Clewer, Cindy Tree, Ellen Balderas, Brittany Ignatius, Kurt Kasky, Beth Cosby, Derek Buskovit, and Divya Manikim at Phoenix Academy. And the title of their grant is the Phoenix Academy SMART Program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're very excited about this program. So for those of you that don't know a lot about Phoenix Academy students, a lot of our students struggle with emotional regulation. That's why they go to Phoenix Academy. And a number of them are also nonverbal or have limited verbal skills. So we're putting together this sensory room that is actually a rather powerful room. Like, I'm super excited about it. So one of the things that students do is they get in the room and they try out all these, it's almost like a physical therapy room where they have therapy balls and balance beams, and they get to see how their body works, and they can kind of figure out, or we'll help them to notice in a fun, playful way what gets them upregulated if they're tired, what can help them get to a place where they're ready to learn, or if they're overexcited and about to explode, I'm going to catch them before they get to that point, but what helps down-regulate them, so again, they're ready to learn. So that's kind of my selling point on this, is we're going to really help students, and they're going to help themselves. We'll work with them to figure out what helps them regulate. I'm super excited because I'm hoping I can come back in a year or two and talk about some of the other things. I expect this room will also help us learn attunement, help with attachment issues with students, and really help develop interpersonal skills through the body. So yeah, anyway, super excited. Thank you so much for giving us this event.
So you can feel the passion from the RPS staff that have come up with so many great proposals that we're so excited to be able to support this year. It's extremely exciting time in the foundation, and we look forward to seeing more proposals in the future. For those that are interested in supporting the Rochester Public School Foundation, we started a new way to both do that and honor RPS staff members last year. For the first time, the Public School Foundation made it possible to make a contribution in honor of a specific RPS staff member and include a personal message to that staff member to let them know what they were doing that was great, or what they were doing that made a difference in your student's life. There was a strong response to this from paraprofessionals and administrators and teachers, instructional coaches, and more. This is the list that came about in the first offering of this in 2021. But for those that are looking for a great way to recognize your teacher and honor them around the holiday times or at the end of the school year, or any time that you might be doing that, or you think, oh, I should be doing that, this is a really great way to do that. Check out rpsf.org. We'd love to add to this list next time we report it. And then we're always looking ahead to the next phase, the spring-summer 2022 grant cycle. Preparations are well underway. There'll be an email to RPS staff very shortly to announce the application dates and the availability of the application. For RPS staff and others, we are always looking for help in evaluating grant submissions. It's really important to our process that we continue to engage a diverse group of grant scorers. As always, we're grateful to the district for its support, for inviting us here to announce this exciting news. And for more information on RPSF, how to volunteer or donate, support our mission in other ways, please check out our website at rpsf.org. If there's any questions from the board, now is the time.
I have a comment from Mrs. McLaughlin, who couldn't be here. Karen McLaughlin is the board member who serves on the RPSF committee, and she wanted to be sure that we let you know how proud she is of all of you, how grateful she is for the work that you're doing, and congratulations to the recipients. Mr. Cook, thank you. And Reese, you're a really good moderator. I mean, nice and very photogenic too. So, I mean, it's kind of a win-win. So thank you for that. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I really appreciate this. I see a couple of faces that I recognize and some that are new to me. I think if I worked as an educator within RPS or even as a psychologist, I would certainly tend towards ALC and Phoenix. I also really have a special place in my heart for the community school. So the fact that we are able to get funding to those who have these like innovative, wonderful projects, I'm so glad that we're able to do that. I'm so glad that you asked for the funding, and I'm so glad that you were able to get it, because I hear in my other work about how some of this trickles down into the students, and it's, I love it. Thank you for all the work you do, and thank you also for what you do.
Mr. Barlow.
And I definitely plan on visiting some of the sites to follow up and celebrate in the work you're accomplishing. Then I wanted to commend the foundation for your selection and inclusion of Reese. It's important that we ultimately see the reason why and the reason behind. And so, as Chair Marvin has already acknowledged, it's good to see a student involved and engaged, and thanks to the foundation for doing that.
Reese is a rare find, and we hope she doesn't graduate.
Now, you probably don't mean that, like, for...
Selfishly.
Okay, stick around. Keep doing the good work you're doing, Reese. Thank you. Thank you so much. One more round of applause for everyone. Thank you. Then we will move to 4.02, the referendum update. Dr. Piquel.
Dr. Marvin and board members, as you know, this school district is in the midst of a multi-year, very ambitious effort to meet our future facilities needs, and we have periodically had updates from Executive Director of Operations Scott Sheridan on the progress of that effort, and so it is time for another one of those updates. I want to thank Scott and his team for the work that they've been doing. Anybody who's been into the buildings that referendum is supporting has been struck by how we are creating really amazing spaces for learning and community building. So, Scott, thanks for giving us a sense of how it's going.
I was looking to see if the presentation was up. Anyway.
Hey,
There we go.
There we go. Good evening, board members, and those that are here virtually as well. This is the 23rd update, referendum update. They all began way back in February of 2020. Like I said, this is the 23rd one. We try to come every month. Sometimes we come twice a month to give you an update of how things are going. Ian McWaters, who's part of the construction management group from Knutson that we hired to be our CMA, prepared another presentation for us to go over, along with a budget update and a schedule update as well. Since I can't see it there. This is just the face sheet of it, but what he did is giving an update on the middle school. The middle school is coming along very nicely. It's pretty much fully enclosed, which is good for the workers that have to work, especially tomorrow morning and Thursday morning with the cold temps. But the next picture you'll see here is a shot that looks to the northwest. So we're on the southeast, the southeast corner of the building, kind of looking to the northwest. The main large area there with the black roof, that's one of the 3 gyms. And then the classrooms and corridors are to the right of that. The main entrance is to the left. And these pictures are fairly current. The next one is just looking to the straight north. This one's looking directly at the main entrance, which is the plywood that's covered up there right in the middle. Like I said on my past referendum updates, the view is pretty incredible out that back north corridor. And then this one is from the back side, kind of into the sun, but this is the back of the middle school. As you'll notice, there's the 2 floors there, and so it's kind of like a walkout to the back. When you walk in the front of the building, you're actually on the 2nd floor, and so you would go down to get to that lower level that exits out the back there. That should all be done, and we'll be moving in at the end of July of 22. Longfellow is a little further ahead than where we are at Dakota. We're doing, it's fully enclosed except for a couple windows. This is a corridor. Another corridor with some of the color schemes that were picked. some of the painting that's going on, accent walls. And this shot is looking to the northeast from the southwest corner of the building. You notice this has a more distinct look when you compare it to Dakota. This one has aluminum facing on the front. That highlights, really gives an accent to the building. And the precast is just a little bit different color than Dakota. This is a picture from the northeast looking to the southwest. Further out in those fields, those are the soccer fields that we're going to regroom and prepare for Park and Rec that we'll also have access to as well for our Phi-Ed classes. And again, this is looking to the northwest. The front entrance is almost directly in the middle there. And then this is looking to the south at Longfellow. So this is the backside of Longfellow looking to the south toward 20th Street. You notice it is fully enclosed. Like I said, all the windows are in. And this will actually be done in hopefully late May because of the 45-15 schedule. They start in late July. And Harriet Bishop is the final school we're building. This is an old shot looking to the northwest, giving you an idea. This is Country Club Manor. Another old shot. This is just highlighting the precast that was put up in the number of cranes that we had to use to do it. And this shot is looking straight to the north. So at the bottom of that photograph is the gym. The main entrance is around the corner to the gym to the left, kind of where that orange lull is that's doing the lift up onto the roof. This is looking to the northeast, or southwest actually. This shot is looking to the northeast, and again, right in the middle there is the main entrance. And you notice this has a really distinct different color than Longfellow. They put some color into the precast. I call it kind of a burnt orange. But you'll notice that the roof is almost complete. They're still doing some insulation up on the roof, as you can see. But it's going to be fully enclosed here fairly soon. They still have some windows to do. And the final large project that we're doing is the Century High School Pool Addition. It is coming along. You're really going to start seeing some changes starting next Monday is when they're going to start doing the precast. So they're bringing the cranes in and they'll start putting up the walls. That'll really change the dynamics of the building. If you look right to this is looking northeast, so right on the north side of the current building that you see there in the upper right, that's the gym, but right on the north side of there is where they're building the locker rooms. So the locker rooms will be built off the north end, and there'll be a corridor to come down to go into the pool, which is just north of the north cafeteria at Century. So this is a good shot of the locker room, and this is looking straight south. And this is looking southeast. All the blue duct that you see there will be installed. This massive ventilation system that you need for a pool. So the budget, after all is said and done, we're kind of about where we were last referendum update. We're at about $185.8 million. And with the interest earnings of $3 million, and you add it to the 180.5, we're pretty close to being right on budget. There is a lot of contingency dollars still out there because they always carry contingency until the projects are complete. And there's some other projects we want to complete still, other alternates that we're going to want to take if we have the money once we get to that far. And I know it's really hard to see, and they love all these different colors, but they all mean the same thing. And this is just basically the schedule. Like I said, Bishop we should take owner occupancy and move in on August 22nd. For the pool, that won't be done until mid to late September. Dakota should be, like I said, in July or late June, and then Longfellow hopefully in May or early June. That's the update on the current projects. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you, Scott.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you.
4.03, board chair comments. Just very quickly, at our last regular meeting, we elected new board officers. And I wanted to say at this time, I wanted to say thank you to former board officers, Clerk Melissa Amundson and Treasurer Julie Workman. You're not here, but we appreciate you for the work that you've done. And I want to congratulate our newly elected clerk, Don Barlow, and Treasurer Karen McLaughlin. Thank you also to Kathy Nathan, who accepted the board's unanimous vote to serve another year as vice chair. Kathy is one of the most dedicated, capable humans I've ever known. She continues to play a critically important role in doing the work of this board in keeping the chair sort of on the rails, and I couldn't be more appreciative. So congratulations, Kathy, and it's going to be an honor to continue to serve this board and this school district. We have a lot of good things going. We have amazing families, incredible kids, and it really, really is the honor of a lifetime. So thank you. We'll do our best, and we know that you'll continue to let us know how we're doing. Then we will move on to 4.04, Safe and Open School Plan Update. This is an information item. Dr. Bickel.
Dr. Marvin and board members, we actually have got some very important updates to provide you and our school communities with on the specifics of our Safe and Open Schools plan. And I'm going to ask Heather Nestler, who's our Executive Director of Communications, Marketing, and Technology, and Jen Erke, who's our Director of Special Education, to come up and give you those updates. But before they do, I want to touch on, or as they do, that's a better way to put it. As they do, I want to touch on two big issues that have been much on all of our minds, and that is the move to distance learning and the question of mandatory vaccination. These are probably the two more heated issues that have been swirling, not just in Rochester, but across the country around the COVID pandemic. The decisions that Heather and Jen are going to walk you through, though, while less controversial, are not less important, and they involve aligning our strategies with recent guidance from the Centers for Disease Control around quarantine and some slight differences around isolation and some important updates. But before we get to that very important but more nuanced discussion, let me say that the decision that I made and that the board empowered me to make about going to distance learning last week, which began this week, was a very reluctant one. And that we called our plan the Safe and Open Schools Plan because we wanted to keep our schools both safe and open. And I think we can say that we can be very proud of the fact that we have very effectively mitigated the spread of COVID within our schools. It was not, as board members are aware, the actual rate of positive cases of COVID that caused us to go to distance learning. It was the staff shortages that were making it impossible to safely and effectively operate all of our schools. When we took a look last week, after we took a pause on what is called contact tracing in order to get really good hard numbers on our positive cases in our schools, all of them were under 10%. The vast majority were under 8%, most were under 5%, and many were at about 2.5%. And so we can feel good about the mitigation efforts that we had in place. But when we looked at the number of teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, bus drivers, student nutrition service folks who were absent, we simply reached a point of no return. More than half of our schools crossed the 10% consistently absent staff threshold, and heading upwards of that. We had schools over 30% last week. And so we came to the reluctant decision that there was a point at which we needed to make a shift. As board members are aware, we initially looked to make that shift at the building level and not to do it at the district-wide level. But when you got to more than half of our schools that were at that point, and the other half looking at their rising absence rates and saying, we think there but for the grace of God go we, and we may be there next week, we made the difficult decision to make that shift. And so I want to thank our school staffs and especially our parents and students who made this shift very quickly. We considered having a no contact day for students for staff planning purposes, but that was one more day that our families would not have had their students in school, and for those parents who need it, and there are many, childcare. And so we had 2 days last week and we jumped in this week. I want to say today things have gone well, but we know the impact that this is having. I want to say particularly huge thanks to Amy Ike and her team and many others across the district who dramatically increased the number of childcare slots that we're able to provide for students from kindergarten through 5th grade. We were initially, and in most other instances where we've provided childcare at about 200 slots, and literally in a matter of days, we were able to go to 500. And that is also due to paraprofessionals, teachers, administrators, and others who are not directly providing distance learning, who have volunteered and in some cases been reassigned, though there have been no protests, to go and help. And we had 500 kids at John Adams today who are very engaged and occupied, and whose parents we know appreciated that additional support. Final point on distance learning. When we say 2 weeks, we mean 2 weeks. We can never say never. We've learned that the hard way with this pandemic, but I know there's been some skepticism. Is 2 weeks the beginning of distance learning for the duration of the school year? We know the educational, academic, social, emotional, mental health challenges that distance learning poses for our students, and we know the childcare challenges it poses for our families. We designed this 2-week period to coincide with what Mayo Clinic is predicting will be the rise and fall of the Omicron variant. And so we are absolutely committed to bring students back January 31st. That said, we can never say never, but the intent is very, very clear to make that move. So that's a quick overview of the distance learning decision. It's a work in progress. I spent a good part of the weekend responding to emails from staff and parents and some students about that. Many positive, many concerned, and I just want people to know we didn't take it lightly, and we're going to continue to be responsive to the concerns. Final point on the question of mandatory vaccinations. As I know all board members know and most community members know, the Supreme Court decided that the Biden administration's rule that would have been interpreted at the state level here in Minnesota, mandating vaccinations for organizations that employ more than 100 employees, was shot down, to use the legal term. And we and the policy committee of the school board did very careful work in drafting, I think, what would have been a model draft policy, which we have now removed from the agenda because it was entirely rooted in the requirement of the federal mandate. And so we are not bringing that before you right now. To my knowledge and by my recommendation, we have no plans to move in that direction, but we will continue to monitor the federal and state level policy environment, and certainly the policy committee will revisit that discussion. What I want to reiterate, somewhat similar to the no more than 2 weeks point on distance learning, is we are not moving forward with the vaccine mandate. We have every reason to believe very high percentages of RPS staff are already mandated by choice, and we thank them for that, and we encourage them to get their boosters. And the federal mandate never included students, though there were a lot of people who were emailed and called concerned that it did. So with that as kind of some of the big macro picture for what we're thinking about, I want to thank Heather and Jen for their work with the rest of our small core team, which is also informed by partners from Olmsted County and Mayo Clinic more broadly, and turn it over to you for an update of the rest of what we're doing to mitigate COVID in our schools.
Thanks, Dr. Raquel. Good evening, board members. We are going to talk about the following things that you see up there tonight: contact tracing, quarantine, and isolation. You can take a peek at it. We'll go through it. I just wanted to give you a summary here and also let you know that we plan to include a revised version of our safe and open learning plan on our website tomorrow. So the information we cover here is high level, but it will be deeper in that. So as Dr. Pakel had already mentioned about the contact tracing, we had to temporarily suspend that. But our plan is to resume that contact tracing when we return to in-person learning on January 31st. Contact tracing, as you know, is the process that we use to identify those individuals who are in close contact, meaning 3 feet or less with a positive case, for 15 minutes or longer within that 24-hour period. One thing that we will be making a change come January 31st when our students and staff are all back is our quarantine guidance. So quarantine is used for a person who has been identified as a close contact, as Jen just said, and that person has tested positive with COVID-19. So we would put someone who's a close contact in quarantine. Starting January 31st, we're going to adopt the CDC and MDH guidance on quarantine, which means instead of 10 days, which is what we have been using as our standard, and then allowing some of our individuals to come back on day 8 after testing, all that's going away, and we're going to follow the CDC guidance, which is 5 days. And so on day 6, after being placed into quarantine, individuals may return as long as they are masked and can provide proof of a negative test on day 5. So just to back up one step, quarantine is also only used for individuals who are unvaccinated. So our vaccinated individuals are not placed in quarantine. Unvaccinated individuals are placed in quarantine if they are a close contact. I might have said that too fast because I live it every day, but I hope I corrected myself there. And so they will test and return, and they have the option to return on day 6. Isolation is different than quarantine. Isolation is used when someone has tested positive for COVID-19. And so we are not changing our guidance for isolation. We are telling our staff and our students, if you are positive with COVID-19, you need to isolate for 10 days. The updated guidance, and we have this written on our slides, but I actually want to read it to you verbatim because I think it's important. The updated guidance from CDC allows for the return after 5 days of isolation, but advises that strict wearing of high-quality masks, such as this one, is required to successfully implement that approach. And while we're really proud of our students and our staff because they are adhering to our masking requirements at high levels, it's not completely universal across the board. So we've made, not all of our students are using their masks with fidelity, depending on age level and maybe personality or whatever. And we've not made investments in these types of masks and the fit. So we are going to continue to adhere to the stricter standard for the return of confirmed COVID cases. All right, this next one is test to stay. And so previously we did a pilot called Alternate to Quarantine. And this is really our way of pushing this out to the rest of the district. So test to stay is RPS's long-term strategy for enabling unvaccinated students to remain in school if they have been identified as a close contact but have not tested positive for COVID and are not showing any symptoms. We are looking at a staggered rollout of test to stay across the school district that will begin a couple weeks after we return. About February 14th is the plan. So as we take a look at different options that are available to students and staff for testing or screening for COVID, we have several different options. The first one is the Zoom-enabled Vault Health saliva test kits that we have. They can take home. They're for students or staff, and they actually log in and somebody walks them through the testing process. Another one we have is Buy Next Now. It's over the counter. That one is primarily for students, but we have been using them for staff. And now we have a new test in called the BD Veritor, and that's another over-the-counter test, and that we will be using primarily for staff, either symptomatic or asymptomatic, to be able to test for COVID.
We also continue to work with outside partners on vaccination clinics, and our youngest students, ages 5 to 11, are the most recent people that can receive the vaccination. So as you can imagine, our take rate on vaccination for our young students is lower than that of our secondary students. We are working with Olmsted County Public Health Services to offer 2 clinics coming up in February. We were actually hoping to offer them this week, but with the high case rate in this county, we defer to our partner and we rescheduled it to February. So we are targeting Sunset Terrace Elementary School along with Elton Hills and Gage Elementary students to come into a vaccination clinic on February 8th. We'll do this right after school at 4:30, from 4:30 to 6. And so we are going to work with the county to do pre-registration. And again, we're targeting those 3 schools for that particular clinic. And then later in the week on Thursday, we're going to have a clinic offering at Franklin Elementary with the target audience of Franklin Elementary and Pinewood students. Now, we can open that up wider. For students ages 5 to 11, we started there knowing the need was the greatest there. And the county will work with us if we need to expand as well. So we're really fortunate about that. And we do have a second dose scheduled. So when they schedule their first appointment, they will schedule their second appointment as well. Also, we're working with some outside partners, ACLA, which is the Alliance of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Latin Americans, and HACER, which is our Hispanic Advocacy and Community Empowerment through Research Group, and Community Health Services. So those three organizations are working on a vaccination clinic for families coming up February 19th at Riverside Elementary. So we are working really closely with our community schools partner there to make sure that we are messaging the appropriate information to the right families. So we hope that we can vaccinate some individuals through those opportunities and get us at a higher percentage. Boosters. So I provided the definition of up to date. It means a person that has received all recommended COVID-19 vaccinations, including booster doses. And then the definition of fully vaccinated individual is a person who has received their primary series of COVID vaccines. So that would be the 2 doses for Pfizer and Moderna, or the 1 dose for Johnson & Johnson. We strongly recommend that our staff that are eligible for a booster shot get their booster dose. And we did promote a free booster clinic. I believe it was not this past Saturday, the Saturday before, through Olmsted County Public Health to our staff so that they were aware of that, as well as other resources that we intend to share with our staff where they can receive their booster doses.
Another area that always comes up is wondering about athletics. So RPS will continue to follow the Minnesota State High School League guidelines, which state that athletes are to wear masks when not participating in competition, and are encouraged to, but not required to wear them during competition when on the field, court, or rink. Spectators are required to wear masks in all RPS buildings, and we are asking our visitor teams and their spectators to follow the RPS guidelines.
Yeah, that'll be an important thing, is asking our communities that come in to Rochester facilities to help support our mask mandate. So that's one thing we included in here for your information. OSHA, the vaccination and or required testing mandate, Superintendent Pakel already touched on this, but we just wanted to make sure that we highlighted in here that we will not have to follow that mandate at this time. It required organizations with 100 or more employees to require vaccination or require testing weekly for employees. And so we do have some next steps here. We are, our policy committee of the school board will continue to monitor this issue, and then we're still going to collect and record staff vaccination status on a voluntary level. And so far, our staff have been really willing to provide that information to us, and it is on a HIPAA compliant form. So we're going to continue to collect that in the event that we may need that someday. But for now, that really concludes the major updates for the changes that we are going to be including in the overall safe and open school plan. So now we can take questions if you have any. Mr. Barlow.
Yes, I have 2 questions. One deals with the vaccination clinics. Location and time, 4:30 to 6. Yep. Have the planners or designers of the clinics taken into consideration that there is probably a significant portion of the community, students, parents who may be at work or not able to participate in these clinics at this time frame? And additionally, do these schools serve the underrepresented populations that could potentially benefit from these clinics?
Mm-hmm. Yep, great points. We are working with our bilingual team. We did translate flyers into we have flyers in 3 languages for both of those clinics, and they are English, Spanish, and Somali. And then we are working with community partners to do specific outreach to our families as well. This all changed late last week because of the case rate in the community. So we've got a little more time, but as Olmsted County Public Health Services shared with me,
you can promote something a couple weeks in advance and you'll start getting people to really respond within that week window. And so they also shared with us, though, that that time frame was ideal in terms of clinics. The one at Riverside is a Saturday clinic. So we are going to have to work hard to notify families and to make sure that they're aware of the time frame. We chose 4:30 because it is right after pickup. So as soon as those buses leave, there's a lot of parents that come and pick up their students and they'll have to accompany their child. That was the best time frame during a week to do that. And we wanted to try to offer it during the weekday because we have had some Saturday clinics and we just really want to see this be successful. And we'll see how Riverside turns out. But last time we did one at Riverside on a Saturday, we had 200 slots and we filled all 200 slots for families. So that's some of the consideration there.
Okay, and then also athletics. And I was somewhat intrigued by the fact that we, as a district, require mask. And yet for spectators who may be supporting out-of-town teams, they're simply being asked if they wouldn't mind would they wear a mask. Well, my words, not the language of your presentation. I just find it somewhat odd. Either the way I consider this, either we have a policy that we expect everyone to comply with who enter our buildings, or we don't. And if we don't, then should anyone actually then need to wear a mask if we're opening the door to our athletic programs to where it's optional? I'm just curious as to the thought process that went in regarding this.
It's not optional. It's just that we do have some, and I'm sure Dr. Patel, if you want to hop in here, but we have noticed some non-compliance in the stands. And so we can't always address that during the middle of a competition. And so now we're actually saying, hey, teams coming in here, we have this policy, you have to adhere to it. So that's what we mean. That's why we brought that forward and highlighted that piece, especially now that the city has a mask mandate through February 7th, I believe. It's important to know. It's just bringing attention to it, which is why we included it. I don't know if you want to add anything additional.
Yeah, it is a requirement for us. It's just, as you can imagine, you get to a game and it's tough to enforce. So I'm meeting tomorrow with the superintendents, high school principals, and athletic directors from the Big Nine. And I'm going to say, look, we know you have different policies, and we would really, really appreciate that you would message to your families when you're in one of our facilities, please respect our requirements. It's tough when you're there to do the enforcement piece with people who aren't Rochester families, but our policy is clear and our signage is clear. And we're going to ask them to lean in. And I think actually the city mandate may help somewhat in getting enforcement with that. Our families, I have to say, generally by and large, they know what our requirements are, and they've been abiding by it. And I have to say that the problems I thought we might have around this, by and large, have not been as bad as they might have been. We've had a couple of bumps in terms of confrontations, but it remains a continuing concern. And as we know, we go further into the winter sports seasons where we're all inside, it's just something for us to flag.
And so the other part of my concern is, if you will, the selective identification of people who are maybe not masked. And I just want to be sure that there aren't individuals or particular people groups or, and we're using the term enforcement, whereas we're not really enforcing. We have the ability to trespass a person, but staff, can you explain how that enforcement, if we are, what that looks like? I observe what we do here at our board meetings. Is it different than what we do at our board meetings in a sporting event as it relates to compliance/enforcement?
I can take that. I don't think it's much different. We have not had to trespass anybody who has been non-compliant. It's from what I have heard, and Director Barlow, I'm not 100%, I'm not at all the athletic events, but when we have our activities directors or the event manager that's there, they approach our individuals. Kind of tricky. I know there are times when we have students that make comments to say, hey, put your mask on. And so as far as I know, and Dr. Patel just alluded to this or stated it actually, we haven't had that many
problems with it, whereas it could cause, I mean, it can be a polarizing topic, but we have a policy that we adhere to. So as far as I know, there hasn't been anything of significance that has occurred other than the conversation to put the mask on or please leave our facility. And I don't think there's been issues.
Other questions? Ms. Nathan?
So thank you for the update. I'm wondering when the Test to Stay starts rolling out, who parents can expect to hear communication from, and maybe what the first steps a parent might have to take?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'll craft that here at the district level, but we'll be working very closely with our schools, and parents will likely hear from their school. That's how we rolled out our Alt-Q process. And so parents will receive information about what this is. And our website needs to be updated with the language of Test to Stay. But we do have a website that exists now called Alternative to Quarantine. And the information is very much the same. We have instructional videos on what to expect and how it works that the district created, along with how the test works. So there's a huge FAQ section. So our schools will communicate with parents with that information. In addition, we will also send out a compliant, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like a permission slip. I don't know why I'm lost for words, but a consent form. There you go, consent. It's been a long Tuesday. And so we'll send that out to parents. And so parents will opt in. I mean, you do not have to participate in this program, but it is a way to keep students that are unvaccinated in our schools. So we'll send that consent form. We also ask if they have technology at home, because these tests require that you upload a photograph so we know if your test is negative or positive, and we have a coordinator that will take a look at that in the morning before admittance into school. All that's explained. And we've had really good luck with it in our other buildings. So we'll do the same thing. Director Nathan will work with our schools to message that, send videos, as well as links. And then if your home is without technology, we work to send a device home with the student along with the test kit when they are called for as a close contact.
Thanks.
I have a question, and this has been an issue, I think, for other facilities as well, about the language around on your booster slide where it says the CDC says up to date means a person who has received all recommended COVID-19 vaccines, including any booster doses when available. So, or when eligible. So if the individual, for whatever reason, has decided to get vaccinated and they received their 2 primary doses and are a close contact, they're not yet eligible for their booster dosage yet. Are they considered up to date? I mean, they're not complying, if you understand what I'm saying. Like, would you still consider them up to date? They wouldn't necessarily have to quarantine if they were a close contact. Or would they? Because they have yet to have their booster.
That's our current plan says that, and that guidance has changed slightly. So we are discussing how to make that work, because we don't want to have issues where we have staff that are quarantined, but they've been vaccinated already, but they don't have their booster dose, which is why we're really strongly suggesting they get their booster dose. And I believe that is for anyone 12 and up that has received their vaccine right now. So the guidance still says fully vaccinated.
Right. And so I guess to me, it's like fully vaccinated to what you are eligible for now, or fully vaccinated you have for some people who need 2 primary doses or 3 primary doses plus a booster.
Yeah.
Is it all of those doses and the booster, and then you're fully vaccinated? Because might there be people just in this space, right, that have maybe 2 primary doses, not a booster, or 3 primary doses and not necessarily their booster? Would they be considered up to date because they're not yet eligible for that additional shot, or are they considered fully vaccinated because they can't yet get their booster?
I just want to say, Dr. Garcia, thank you for that. That is very helpful. It's one layer deeper. We've had some conversations, but as Heather was saying, I think I'd like to have us take that question and make sure we look very carefully at the current guidance. If either of my colleagues have a more specific response, but I think every time we think we've unpeeled one layer of the onion, another one comes. And so I would like to take that and loop back to you and the community unless there's a more immediate, straightforward response based on guidance. But I think you've identified a gray area that we'll take this question and clarify.
I think what she's asking is that time between the second dose and third dose, you are considered up to date because you are not yet eligible for that booster dose.
Okay, that is essentially my question.
You're still up to date, but do you quarantine?
You're up to date, but you're not fully
you don't have to quarantine.
vaccinated, so okay. But if you did not get the booster when eligible, like after that 6-month period, then you would.
That's the piece we have to figure out.
Okay.
And it's one that we talked about at our COVID advisory team, I think 2 Mondays ago with some of our external partners, and the language can be confusing.
Right.
And so it's something it's another layer that we're peeling back and still working through.
Because I can just imagine for a parent that has kids in 2 separate age categories, right? Like if they have somebody who's 12 and they also have a 5-year-old, if one of them got a primary dose and then they're at their second primary dose and now the other one is now eligible, so they're kind of, they're not necessarily in sync with each other. Are we considering those kids fully vaccinated / up to date?
And it's very tricky. Olmsted County Public Health will tell you when we talked with them that, once upon a time, the recommendation was 6 months. So after 6 months of your 2-dose shot, you were eligible. Now it's 5 months. And so the moving timelines are also making things tricky. So there are so many different flowcharts and grids and things that MDE has sent out. And so we don't have that immediate answer right now. And as Dr. Patel said, we'll circle back, but it does require a little bit more conversation. But for the sake of tonight, if you were to get your booster shot today, you would be considered fully up to date with the booster shot today because it doesn't have that 2-week waiting period that a regular dose would be.
And I just want to clear up a concern that I'm quite sure is misinformed from some folks. When you have the vaccination clinics at schools, that does not mean that you will be vaccinating children whose parents do not want them. You're already saying no. So
Correct.
you're not going to be grabbing kids and say, get in here, get vaccinated, and don't tell your mom.
No, it's an opportunity for families. It's after school. Parents have to consent and parents must be present in order to have their 5 to 11-year-old child vaccinated.
I heard you say parents have to be present and consent.
Correct.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you for saying that you also had it translated in other languages because you knew that was going to be a question.
Yes. Thank you so much. We appreciate the work you're continuing to do.
Thank you.
4.05, MSBA, Minnesota School Boards Association Conference Session Report and Discussion. Some board members were able to attend the Minnesota School Board's annual conference in Minneapolis. It was fully masked, absolutely distanced. There's some wonderfully informative sessions up there. One that I attended I thought was particularly interesting and has to do, I think it's interesting for the public to know this, because it has to do with the perception that some folks have that school boards have become political. The Minnesota School Board has exited the National Association of School Boards Association. They feel that that organization has become too political, has become too involved in bureaucracy. So Minnesota School Boards Association is joining with a number of other states in creating a new, totally apolitical school board association that will be laser focused on working with schools and students at the national level. We are determined that, and our school board especially, that we will continue to be focused on what is good for kids and families and communities, and that politics will not be involved. Our school board has not operated that way, and so we have left the National Association. Anybody else want to give a report about happenings there?
I can.
Ms. Nathan.
So I have been serving on a advisory committee for the Minnesota Principals Survey, which is the first survey of principals statewide that has been done, and it's being done by the University of Minnesota. And so we did a presentation to MSBA about the findings, specifically findings related to the work of school boards. And I have a one-page fact sheet that I can give to you all that summarizes the initial takeaways. The full responses will be available in February, and they will be disaggregated by the local service co-op area. So we'll have all of our data for our area, our region, and we'll be able to request that data so that we can see specifically what principals in our region are saying compared to principals statewide. So it's a really exciting piece of information that really show us specifically what principals are saying about what they need for their professional development, that's an area that they felt that needed development, and recognizing both the mental health needs of students and staff and principals themselves being an area that needs to be developed. And finally, what school boards can do for our building leaders to help clarify or inform the public about what decisions made in the district are those that are the responsibility of the school board or the superintendent versus things that building leadership have authority over, hopefully to help with their communications with their parents and families and reduce some of the misunderstandings there.
Thank you.
I went to that presentation, and I thought it was excellent. I would also say that, as a mental health professional, when they showed the data about principals being concerned, not just for student mental health, but also educator mental health, and that they didn't feel like other professionals, like in the mental health field, were providing them any assistance. I felt like, I even told that to the presenters, like it was kind of a gut punch because I am now have moved away from what I'm doing. I was working out at St. Peter, and now I work here in the community as a mental health professional. And I'm like, but I am doing that work. So what is it that we aren't doing as mental health professionals to like let people know that they are, that they're receiving that service? And I think perhaps the difference is, but I will also like to bring this to our tri-government committee, is if a teacher or a parent of a student in the district are coming to someone for mental health services, my assumption now is like that is them seeing that they are taking care of their own mental health versus the school is trying to do something or the district is trying to do something to promote or stabilize their mental health. And so how can we as mental health professionals, and there are many of us in the community, better support than I guess what we're doing right now, which is just receiving like an onslaught of people. How can we better do that pairing or that work here in our district so that principals aren't stressing about not only their staff in the building, but also their students? And how can the families feel like the principals and the rest of the district are also kind of holding all of that for everybody? So thank you for the presentation. It was like not necessarily anything I didn't already know, but just that there's that miscommunication of like, but the mental health professionals in this community are so overworked, like we have literally no space because everybody is in our office. And how is it that we as a district are not making that, like making our, staff and our families feel held in that way? So.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to 4.06, board member committee updates. Any board members have board committee work that they'd like to report on?
I can speak very briefly for my colleagues who are not in the room. So our legislative committee, we are going to be meeting later this month, next week, the 27th, with some of our legislators to have sort of preliminary conversations about how we can work to kind of lift some of our legislative priorities off the ground. And then also additionally planning in the future, as very many of you well know, that we're going to be having some, I'm sorry, I caught what Heather has, very long Tuesday, that we'll also be doing candidate forums later when we've already kind of figuring out maybe giving them a platform to sort of talk about their priorities for schools in our area. So you'll hear more on that. I don't know if Julie, if you want to add anything in. I don't know if she's furiously typing or, nope, she's good. Thank you.
Okay, I think that both Ms. Workman and Ms. Amundsen too also wanted to mention that The school board will be offering a school board academy, probably in February, March. And that will be free and open to the public for anyone who is considering running for school board and wants some information about how that works, how school board works, and for that matter, for anybody who wants to get background about what school boards do. We continue to understand that it is confusing because city council works one way, county commissioners work another way, state legislatures work another way, school boards work an entirely different way. And I think people have expectations about what school boards can do, should do, that they have no authority to do. But it's going to be a great education, and especially for those of you who are considering running for school board. It's a great way to get started. And again, no cost. And Ms. Amundsen is saying,
They think their mics are working.
oh, she's saying she thinks her microphone's working. Okay, that's not about the school board academy, however.
I don't know.
Oh,
Can you hear us now?
yes.
Okay, so Julie, you can sit. Okay.
And now we can't hear you.
Julie was just saying that will be in March or April.
March or April. Okay, good enough. And that information will be available shortly. All right, yes, Ms. Nathan.
I wanted to give the update on the virtual learning or listening session that was happening this Thursday.
Okay.
From 7 p.m. And I'm wondering if any of our district staff can tell us, is registration still available for that? There are still openings available. And that link is available on the district website under our news section.
And because it's virtual, Ms. Nathan, as you said, it's important that you are registered ahead of time. It's, again, no cost, but this is going to be an opportunity for community members to talk and for board members to listen. It'll happen in small groups virtually, and we'll take notes and provide answers either during or afterwards. So still time to register for that. All right, then we will move to 4.07, COVID funding update. This is an information item. Dr. Piquel.
Madam Chair and members, I just want to begin by saying I think it's appropriate on this first day of distance learning that the school board meeting is having some technical challenges. Every teacher and student in this district is having them today, and so we're sort of feeling your stress here with trying to make this work, but we're getting through it. Executive Director of Finance, John Carlson, would normally provide this update, but he is away, and so you got me. But it's going to be fairly brief because we have decided, with the board's, the board has decided, and I agree with the decision, that we are going to allocate the remaining funds that we have from the federal government for mitigation of the COVID virus concurrent with planning for our budget for the 22-23 school year and subsequent years. And so when we scheduled this item for the agenda, we had some sense that we might be ready to talk about exactly how we're going to allocate the remaining funds that we have. We are going to be taking that up at the study session on the 25th of January, and the board will be looking at it on the 8th of February. But we kept this item on the agenda tonight because we think it's always important to report to the community and all of our stakeholders how we're using these dollars. And so I'm going to move at some breakneck speed here. All of these numbers are contained in a memo that is available through board docs. And I want to move at breakneck speed because I know we're all excited that we're going to talk about math tonight. And I want to get to math right now. So I'm going to give you some math to get us to the math. Our total funding to Rochester Public Schools from all federal sources was $39.3 million. As of January 14th, we had spent $13 million of that. $6 million of it went for staffing, people to do the kind of work that that Leah and Heather just talked about, Jen and Leah just talked about, contact tracing, instructional technology, technology support, summer school, and especially RPS online. $3.4 million was for technology, lap books for teachers, Chromebooks for kids. $0.8 million was for air purifying devices, $0.5 million for cleaning equipment, $0.3 million for vehicles to transport students, specifically vans, and $3.3 million on contracted transportation. That means there's some money left over. We have $2.9 million, which is encumbered, means there are plans to spend it, but those plans have not yet been implemented because we haven't done the work yet. And that includes staffing for our RPS online school, which, as board members know, is very full with 500 students, all of whom are being well served in the midst of this pandemic. Staff who support instruction through technology, obviously a huge need for us, especially these next 2 weeks. Technology support, the staff who do our contact tracing, managing our Test to Stay program, Chromebooks for adult basic education, and then the recent air purifying devices and equity specialist positions that we've hired to lean in to both continually enhancing the quality of air and ventilation in our buildings and staff available to help students readjust to in-person learning after a year and a half of this pandemic or more than that time. So that leaves $23 million left as of January 14th. There are some pots in that $23 million that are by statute designated to certain purposes. Things like out-of-school time or summer school. And so those are the resources that we'll be working with the board and proposing to the board strategies for spending. We continue to believe the 4 priorities that we articulated last time we did one of these updates will be the priorities. We'll be bringing plans to you around over the next month and a half. The first is continuing to mitigate the spread of the virus, staffing and supplies focused on COVID mitigation. The second will be mitigating the social, emotional, and academic, especially consequences of the pandemic. So additional supports such as potentially small group tutoring, other interventions to help students recover academically from what is often called learning loss. Investments in staff, because we know that retaining our staff during this very challenging time is critical to the well-being of our students. And then a limited stream of funding that will, but very importantly, lay the groundwork for long-term improvement in Rochester Public Schools, such as things tied to our new strategic action plan that the board will be reviewing and I hope approving in June. So we've passed a couple of milestones. In December, we gave you the updated 5-year general fund projection when we talked about the deficit that we are making plans to address over the next 3 years. On January 11th, the board gave us guidance on some broad options for reconciling that deficit and building the budget. And we will be moving toward sharpening those plans at the study session at the end of this month and then February 8th. And we are hopefully, and I believe we will make this goal on track by May 17th to have formal consideration of the district's budget that will include all of those remaining federal funds. So in short, we've laid a lot of groundwork, mostly to date with mitigating COVID in our schools, and we have a remainder of the dollars that we'll be allocating as you make decisions on the budget in the weeks ahead. One final point, none of those federal dollars carried with them requirements for any COVID mitigation strategies that we had to adopt. We did not have to adopt masking. We did not have to adopt social distancing. We did not have to adopt quarantining. We did not have to adopt an approach to vaccination. All of those were local decisions in this school district, as in every school district. The funds were allocated based upon the size of enrollment and the other demographic markers that are used to allocate federal funds and state funds, in fact. But there were no strings attached that we needed to respond to in order to get those federal funds. So with that, I know you'll all be happy that John will be back to do this the next time, but hopefully that's kind of a whirlwind tour through these dollars. Final point, one more final point, all of these funds are fully audited as part of our annual audit, and as board members are aware, once again, we were fortunate to have an entirely clean audit with no findings for our school district, which is very rare for a district of our size, and these funds will be fully accounted for in the auditing of our district's current year budget as they were last year. Madam Chair.
Well, you're no John Carlson, but you did a darn fine job there, so thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board members? Okay, and again, to reinforce one more time, Dr. Piquel, these funds that the district gets are scrupulously accounted for. And they have to be used, that they can only be used for a relatively limited number of uses. For the most part, we spend money from our funds and then get reimbursed for those funds that are appropriate. So I think that's important too. Thank you.
And
Any-
Chair Marvin, I
Yes.
would point out that in board docs, there is a excruciating detailed spreadsheet of all of the expenditures to funds to date by federal source and tracking code and how much we received and how much has been spent. So for those people looking for even more detail, who also like math, that is available.
And by excruciating, you meant really interesting.
Really interesting.
We have math people coming in, Kathy, so you have to be careful. Okay, thank you so much. 5.0 consent agenda. Any items to be removed for separate consideration?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. We'll have a roll call vote. Ms. Severson.
Thank you. Chair Marvin?
Aye.
Vice Chair Nathan?
Aye.
Director Workman?
Aye.
Director Amundson?
Aye.
Clerk Barlow?
Aye.
And Director Garcia?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Excellent. 6.01, math.
Madam Chair, per
Oh,
tradition,
thank you.
I might recognize our retirees.
Absolutely, thank you.
For those in the audience, for the first few meetings, I was the one who kept forgetting this item, and now I've kind of gotten to the point where I look forward to recognizing. We just have 4 to recognize tonight who are retiring from our school district, starting with Monica J. Bowler, who has been a principal on special assignment at the Edison Building. Ms. Bowler has been with the district for 32 years. Moving on to Kurt D. Verdorn, who is a senior high assistant principal at Century High School. And Mr. Verdorn has been with the district for 22 years. Deborah A. New, who is a special education paraprofessional at Hoover Early Learning School. And Ms. New has been with the district for 5 years. And James S. Lynch, a grounds equipment operator at the Facilities Service Center. Mr. Lynch has been with the district for 23 years, and so we thank all of them for their work and wish them the best in their next adventures.
Absolutely. Thank you. Then we'll move on to math. 6.01, math overview. Dr. Piquel.
And directors of the board, I want to recognize Brenda Wichman, who is our Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction, to come up and bring the colleagues up to give you a sense of the work of Rochester Public Schools in mathematics. As board members know, we are taking a tour in the first board meetings of this school year through our major content areas. And so at our last board meeting, we did a pretty deep dive into English language arts, and tonight we have the opportunity to do the same with mathematics. And so Brenda, thank you for pulling this together and your team for pulling the group together. And there is a briefing paper that is posted with our board materials for those of you who want some more information and some links that are available as well. Thank you.
Yes, Chair Marvin, school board members, and Dr. Piquel, we are excited to talk about math tonight. And while my colleagues come forward, Peter, if you want to grab one more chair, we're going to need one more. We really enjoy doing these subject area updates, and there will be a math test tonight, so be prepared for that. No calculators. And we have an all-star guest list again today, like we normally do. Peter Dodds, you're familiar with him by now from elementary curriculum. Heather Willman, Jen Conan, who is our STEM implementation associate. Jake Johnson, math teacher from John Marshall, and Amy Hughes, Gage Elementary assistant principal. Do you have the clicker? Great. I'll get it. Go ahead.
All right, I think I get to start us out. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the articulation cycle, just so you kind of have an idea of what we've done previous to coming here and you have a bit of background. So mathematics was reviewed last in 2017, and we purchased new materials, and they were implemented in 2018. That was for most major core content areas. The math electives, sometimes we don't get to those as quickly or as frequently with new materials, but that's when we reviewed them.
Our goal is to review mathematics during the 23-24 school year, and this will be a 2-year process. So during the 21-22 school year, MDE started the process of reviewing and revising the math standards, and they will be submitted to rulemaking at that time. So we're in a little bit different process with mathematics, just in terms of when the new standards are coming on board. We do have prioritized learnings that were developed in K through 12, and they were reviewed and revised at the high school level. So as we worked with high school, we felt like the prioritized learnings were more kind of a laundry list of our table of contents, and we wanted them to be more broad and deeper. So you can see on the next slide, if you guys can see it, we've really moved away from kind of just content knowledge to computation and operations, visual representations, verbal and written communication skills, and then that problem solving and application. We want to be sure that the students can actually take the mathematical concepts and apply them in a new setting. And so our high school math teachers really were the first ones to say, okay, let's take a look at this. And some of our middle school math folks were involved as well because they teach accelerated math.
Okay, so why does it matter? Again, we want to keep the context in mind. And this was a quote from the NCTM president from a number of years ago, but we highlighted in blue what we felt like is the most relevant from that quote. And words that should stand out and hopefully come through, I think, in when we highlight some of our practitioners here is the idea of flexibility, the idea of perseverance, and then motivating and developing a positive mathematical identity. I did not consider myself a math person, and that's not what we want our students to be doing, right? We want all of our students to have a positive mathematical identity, and that's something that we're going to be working on. Additionally, this ties very closely to, again, our graduate profile. Particularly the critical thinker, but also skilled communicator, as we're wanting our students to develop the language needed to be able to talk about math and talk about their reasoning. And you'll see an example of that a little bit shortly here as well.
So some promising practices that we're going to be highlighting tonight so you kind of get a sense of what they look like and feel like. First is number talks. So we have Amy Hughes with us who's going to be actually, I think, walking you through a number talk and a little bit of the thinking around that practice. We want to see rich open-ended tasks and activities. We are working really hard on mathematics-specific training for our new teachers. So this year we have a larger than usual number of new math teachers at the secondary level. And so we've been able to provide math-specific training each of our new teacher sessions. In fact, Jake Johnson, who's here and will talk a little bit about intermediate algebra and the block concept, was able to work with those math teachers. So we can get them onboarded right away and get them the math teaching and experience that they need. We also are really focused on equity in our curriculum. So our materials, everyday math in particular, really focuses on equitable environments for learning. You'll see that in the spiraling. You also see that in a lot of the explanation that students need to have about the mathematical practices. And then Jen's going to talk a little bit about the equitable and inclusive math practices and coaching cohort. And then finally, Jake will highlight that unique flexible teaching model that he uses in intermediate algebra.
I don't have my slides, so. So I have to turn back around so I can see. So I think one of the biggest things we probably talked about in math is from the way we were taught, you know, back when we were in school, things have changed a lot, and we hear that from parents all the time. Why do we have new math? Why is everything changed? Why aren't we doing things the same way that we did it when I was in school? And I think our biggest learning that we've had over time is that we need to encourage students, and we ourselves even use multiple strategies when we are doing math. We don't often think that we are, but we often are using lots of different strategies. We want to encourage our students to do the same. And the importance of explaining our thinking has become more prevalent as we've adopted these new standards as well. It's not just about that you can solve the problem and get the right answer, but how are you thinking about the problem and how are you strategizing to solve that problem has become more prevalent as we've learned and worked through these new standards over the last few years. And that idea of conceptual versus procedural, lots of procedures and algorithms have been taught before these new standards, but it's more about kids understanding why are we doing things the way we're doing them and how can we do them in multiple different ways to get to the same answer. And so that's been more on the forefront, as well as trying to teach kids that the conceptual understanding is as important as getting the answer and the procedural pieces that entails. Algorithms probably look a lot different than the way we were taught because of that conceptual piece being brought into that instruction and that teaching. And so it's not just about teaching kids the steps in the process, but teaching them how to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it and why we do things in certain ways in mathematics as well. And we explore those concepts in earlier grades because we need to build that foundation and that whole scope and sequence that moves through. We start learning about them in elementary school so that later on when we get to those algebraic problems in those classes, we understand what that means earlier than we did previously before the new standards. And math hasn't changed. Our instruction has changed for the better. And so it's not about that there's new math and that we have all these newly developed things. It's just that we're teaching them differently so kids have a better understanding of those concepts. And the reasons why we needed to change, a big reason is we have devices at our fingertips now that we never had available before. We have phones and we have computers and we have laptops available to us. We can Google the right answer if we needed to, right? So kids don't need to know how to get the answer. They need to understand why we're doing things the way that we're doing them. And we want students to think and not just do, and not just tell kids, like, put this zero here to hold the place, but tell them why we're doing that and why it's important to understand how to do math in the way that they're doing it now. And we want them to understand the concepts and not just memorize those steps in the process. The standard algorithm is not always the most efficient. It used to be the only way we were taught to multiply or divide or add was just this one algorithm, but it's not the only way to get the answer. We want students and teachers to understand that there's multiple ways to get there and that all those ways are helping you understand how to do the problem. And if students, it's not that we're telling students to solve this problem in multiple ways. We're teaching them those different strategies so that when they come up on a problem, they can pick the strategy that helps them solve that problem the best. It's not that we're saying solve 4 + 3 in 12 different ways. It's how do you understand what 4 + 3 really means and understand that at a conceptual level, not just a procedural level. So we're going to try a math problem. So if I gave you the problem, we're not using paper, pencil, or calculators. If I gave you the problem 18 times 5, solve that right now.
90.
Okay. The answer is
student.
It's 90, right? And we know it's 90. We didn't have to write it down. We didn't have to do those things. We could solve it, right? I'm guessing that there's multiple ways to do that. Some people in their mind might have pictured the traditional 18 times 5 and you know, multiplied 5 times 4 or 8 times 5 and made it 40 and carried the 40. You might have done that in your head. Probably not, though, because that's a lot of steps to try to memorize and picture in your mind. Did anybody round? Did anybody say, oh, 18 could be 20 times 5. I know that's 100. I'm going to take away 2 groups of 5 then to get back to the 18, which is going to give me 90. Did you do it a different way?
I did it the rounding way. I
Okay.
pretended it was 100 and then it subtracted.
Right, so how'd you get to 100?
Well, 5 times 20.
Right, so you did 5 times 20, and then you had to subtract the 2 groups because we weren't multiplying 20 times 5, we were multiplying 18 times 5, right? So we took away that 10 to get back to 90. Did anybody break it down and say like 10 times 5 plus 8 times 5? And they broke down the 18 into 10 and 8? Right, so you said, so you could say, oh, 10 times 5 is 50, that's the 10 from the 18, and then I did 8 times 5 and got 40 more, which made 90. Or did anybody do halving and doubling?
Oh,
That's a
no,
great
we
one.
don't- we don't do that.
Right, we don't often do that, but kids are being taught how to do this, especially with their basic multiplication facts. If you know 4s, then you know 8s because you can double it. If you know 3s, you know 6s because you can double it, or half 6 to 3. So you could do the same thing with this problem. You could say 18, right? Half of 18 is 9. I multiply that 2 times, and then I get 90. So we actually are doing lots of strategies in our head that we don't often think about, and that's what we want kids to be able to do as well. You don't always have paper and pencil, you don't always have a calculator, so you need to know those strategies to do them quickly and efficiently in your head. So what is the most important things that we need to remember? Students know and can be efficient with multiple strategies. We want them just like we were. We solved that problem in lots of different ways. But you understood all the strategies because you've learned the strategies over time, and you used a different strategy for this problem that you thought would be the most efficient. And students need to explain their thinking because that is often what they're required to do in lots of jobs. You don't have to just say, I got the answer as 90 and not ever have to tell people why. And that's not just a mathematical thing, that's just a workplace kind of skill. And students need to be comfortable with all those strategies to understand why certain strategies would be used, and that they're not only building the algorithmic knowledge, but that conceptual understanding so that future math makes sense to them. They learn that in elementary so that it makes sense to them in middle school and high school as they learn higher math. We build that foundation early on in elementary school.
Right, then I will be talking about how Ann Miller, who is the K-8 math specialist, along with me, are supporting the teachers doing the things that Amy has talked about. And Peter referenced how math identity is a huge thing, and getting students to believe that they are knowers and doers and understanders and make sense of math outside of our classrooms. It's not just when they're in our four walls, that they have a deep belief that they can be successful at math, and also that they are impacted by how we as teachers position them within our math classroom, and what are we doing to change that so every student does feel successful. One of the things that Ann and I have been diving into is Catalyzing Change, which is an NCTM publication. They have an early childhood, elementary, a middle school, and a high school version of the book that looks at these deep conversations that we need to start having of how to change what we're doing in the classroom and how it's going to help our students in the math classroom. Currently, right now, we have instructional coaches at the elementary level that are doing a book study with the elementary one. The intervention teachers at the elementary level are going to be looking at this in February. And with our Equitable and Inclusive Math Teaching Practices group, we are also starting to bring in those conversations that we are using to develop what we're trying to do in the classroom. One of the neat things with the Catalyzing Change, as we've looked at the 3 different levels, is they have had these critical challenges, and they are some of those obstacles that are currently in place in our system that are holding some of our students back from being successful in mathematics. And so this highlights what those are at the elementary level, and then there's a nuance of how it changes a little bit at the middle school and how it changes at the high school, but these are woven throughout all of these books. The other thing that Ann and I, along with Sarah Louise Henry, have been working on for the past year almost is the Equitable and Inclusive Math Teaching Practices Cohort. We started looking at things, the 3 of us, last spring, and then pulled together a group of teachers to make a steering committee. And then we pulled that steering committee together in the summer to start laying the groundwork of what we wanted to do with all of our teachers. And so we started that this past fall, and we are meeting throughout this year 5 times. One of the goals of getting this group up and running is making sure that we had representation from all the different levels. So in this group, we do have elementary, middle, and high school teachers, along with C&I people, and the diversity and equity and inclusion groups. We're always looking for more people, so if people are interested, just let us know. And the goal of having this group is so we start having those conversations. We can have little conversations like in our classroom with our PLC, but it needs to be broader. It needs to be starting, as Amy said, at the elementary, so we carry and build on that foundation in middle school, and then the high school builds on that. And these are those things that are helping us build those conversations using catalyzing change and the pathway to equitable math instruction. One of the things that our steering committee did during the summer was look at the equity statements that RPS has, and then looked at it with the lens of being math educators and what does that look like. So on this slide, what you see highlighted is looking at it with that math eye and what it can look like. And this is just an example. The last thing that Ann and I are really working with teachers at all levels is moving away from that I do, we do, you do, focusing on there's just one way to get there, and instead moving, like Amy said, multiple ways, multiple understandings that help build that identity for our students. If we only teach one way, we're stifling that creativity and not letting our students show that they know how to be successful in math outside in their everyday life. And as Amy said, there's multiple ways to do it. Algorithms are one way, and it's not saying it's the way, but showing students that this is a toolkit. I might understand this way, you might understand that way, but we can still talk about math and all be successful. Your turn.
So I teach, I want to talk a little bit about what I see as making for a successful student in a math classroom. So I teach two very interesting groups of students at John Marshall High School. I teach the AP Calculus 1 and 2 courses. So, you know, just think the kid who loves math, the kid who can't get enough and is in math league and is doing every math problem they can do. And then I also teach an intermediate algebra block class for 9th graders whose MCA scores are very low, who do not experience success in traditional math classes. And I just wanted to mention that the biggest difference that I see between those two groups of students is how they view themselves as math learners. What the system has told them over the course of their academic careers about who they are in a math class. And there are some things that we can say that we're going to do to help those kids, but then there are actual things that we can do. So, you know, we want them to see themselves as creators. That sounds good and that is good. But what do we actually do systemically to make that happen is critically important. And that's one of the reasons I love my 9th grade class so much. I teach these kids for 2 hours instead of 1. So it's back to back. They don't leave my room every day. So it's a block setup within a traditional day. So it's a lot of staffing. Like I recognize, 40% of my day is spent with these students, teaching-wise. And also, systemically, the class sizes are kept small. And I thank my administrators and I thank the district for providing the support that these kids need, because our classes, where many classes at a high school level are typically 30, 32, or upwards from there, my block class is capped at 20 students. So 20 students for 2 hours. And what does that mean actually for those kids? Not only do they get more support, which they inevitably do, right? They get more of me. They also are sent the message that, and I think one of the most damaging messages that is sent in math is that it's a race. That if it takes you longer, that you're somehow a failure. And that is why, even probably in this room, there are people with math anxiety. When we say we're going to put a problem up on the board, there's something in people's souls that just goes, ooh, all right, this is uncomfortable to me. Why? Because math, for the longest time, has been taught as a winner-loser sort of subject, right? And that's why people have such, they either love it or they hate it. It's because they've either been a winner or a loser. And one thing that we work so hard in my class to show, both in the class but also just through having 2 hours and spending the time that we need to, is math is not a race. The best mathematicians in the world spend hours and hours and days and weeks doing problems. So, that's one of the things that we can do structurally to actually show kids what it means to be a math learner, is deep problem solving from multiple different angles. But I'll be honest, it's very hard to do that with kids if you took my 20 intermediate algebra block kids and just put them in an intermediate class and just said, well, good luck, a lot of those kids would not be successful. But in my class and through our program, those kids are being successful and they're graduating high school. And when I survey them throughout the year, I ask them questions like, do you like this class? First of all, do you feel nervous in this class? And the responses throughout the year improve as we go, as they start to break away some of those structures that say, this is what it means to be a math learner. You have to do it this way. You have to be fast. And I think when we start to approach math in that way, we can start to break through some of the built-in walls that we've sort of wrapped ourselves in here. So, I could talk more about the intermediate class in a little bit, but that's just a little bit to think about.
So a few broader implications, and then I know you will all have questions for us as well. So one is...
I think your mic needs to...
There we go. One is that we just want to make sure we're moving away from those tracked pathways. Traditionally, we've had just one opportunity for students to move into accelerated math. And so we've broadened that a bit at 6th grade level where you can opt into that pathway, but we need to think about more pathways at more times so that we don't just have one time when students can accelerate. We also need to think about how do we move away from teaching arithmetic, that idea of the teacher's going to show you the way to do it, you're going to practice that same way, and then you're going to practice 10 or 20 of those problems the same exact way. How do we move away from that structure to multiple ways of knowing and solving? And then moving away from massed practice to spaced practice. And you might have watched the video ahead of time about that. But the idea behind mass practice, moving to spaced practice, is that we want to make sure that students are practicing and then they actually get to apply it. And they apply it to a new situation. So we're not going to do all of our practice and then move on and say, okay, you can forget it now because we've moved on to the next chapter, but we're going to continue to go back to those concepts.
Thanks. Okay, so we want to be honest about the challenges, right? These are supposed to be candid conversations. I would say, again, one of the challenges is just time for professional development and continued time for our teachers who have been spending a lot of time, particularly over the last 2 days, making a shift into this distance learning model and working hard to do that. But how do we provide supportive structures for our teachers to be able to really dig in and do some thinking around this? And then also, just to Heather's point, talking about the accessibility, making sure that those pathways are open for all of our students. And then another area of growth is number 3 there, making sure that our teachers are representing the students that they have in front of them. And I know our human resource department has done a lot of work around this and is making progress around this, but that continues to be a challenge, and particularly in math, how important it is to have people in front of the classroom that look like our students. And then finally, just the challenge of the new math standards. We don't quite know what they look like yet, and they'll be coming, and we have to go through that process over the next 2 or 3 years.
So we can't leave it at challenges. So some of the plans that we have in place right now are, 1, to re-examine the prioritized learnings in elementary, middle school, and then the high school math electives. So we want to be sure that we do have the deep, enduring knowledge, and that those are the pieces that we've selected for our prioritized learnings. We also want to support discourse in mathematics. So we want to see that mathematics classroom kind of bubbling over with students talking to one another and explaining how things work. We know that that's not a strength area for our students, that often they want to be able to just show you the answer and not necessarily show you all the steps. So we really need to work on how do we build that into the structures of our classroom and how do we make it safe for risk-taking. We need to strengthen our core instruction and provide more opportunities for students to access the rigorous mathematics, all of our students. And then we really need a strong system of support for our students who aren't, they're not acquiring mathematics at the same rate. Maybe they need more of the time. So same standards, but more time. You probably heard that theme from English. It's the same thing with mathematics. We need to have that good, strong structure to be able to support our students when they need more time. And then I think a piece of that is thinking about quality formative assessments. So how do we know who's getting it and who's not? And I think that's one of the things that I definitely see in Jake's classroom is every day when you leave, you can see he knows exactly who got that concept and who didn't and who he needs to revisit with the next day. So I think that's a piece where we need to provide more time for our teachers to collaborate around. And then finally, that continued goal of retaining a diverse teaching staff. So when we do hire teachers that are diverse, we need to make sure we support them so that they stay. We had a great presentation, I think the last time we were here, about that, but we want to make sure we have both recruitment and retention because we know that that is part of where our future in mathematics is going to be. So we want to open it up to your questions for us. We've got our practitioners down here, and throw any our way that you're wondering about.
Dr. Pikel.
This is fantastic, and I want to ask the question for any of you. You mentioned in your list of challenges sort of a multi-tiered system of supports, which we talked about with English language arts, the opportunity for kids who either missed fundamental concepts or who actually learned the wrong fundamental concepts. So I just missed it, or I actually, so number sense or something like that. In our current structures, you know, and like Jake, I'm excited to come out and see you teach sometime, you know, I want to do it, but across the curriculum, when you have a student in our like class-based current structures where we don't have a lot of small group tutoring and things like that yet, how do you handle that when a student is missing a foundational body of knowledge or a skill that they might have been, you know, planned to master either in an earlier grade or just they weren't ready to get it at that point? How do you think about that? How do you know when that's the case, and how in a class, I mean, Jake, you mentioned smaller class sizes, but how in a class with lots of different needs do you address that, those conceptual misunderstandings or the missing skill pieces? And then how could we support you in doing that better? So how are you doing it today, and how could we do it better?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a definite challenge, but I think it sort of depends on the skill to me as I think about it at the high school level. If it's a fundamental skill for what we're working on in that unit or in that chapter, or however you measure learning, then it needs to be addressed immediately because the student won't experience success on that unit, chapter, whatever, if that structure is unsound. So it needs to be addressed. Different teachers have different strategies for doing that, but it, to me, needs to be done within the context of the class period, and that's critically important. So some teachers use it as bell ringers. Some teachers do sort of number talks to build back on some of the things, or algebra strings, or whatever it might be. There are a variety of strategies that teachers employ. Recognizing, I think, within the context of the class is your best bet. It can't be a thing where we send it home, right? The whole send it home, and I'm sure it'll get done there. I'll speak for myself. I've got 49 minutes daily to work with my students. I want to make the most of every minute that I have with those students. So for me, it's bell ringers. That's the strategy that I use, and it's a way for me at the beginning of class to both start class effectively and quickly, but also to address some of those foundational skills that it's good for all of my students to have, but especially when I identify those. But again, this is looping back from a previous day. A lot of times those things should be identified by teachers with things like exit tickets and formative assessments to say, okay, what don't my kids know? Now what am I going to do about it? That's how I do it, but I know different teachers do different things. And personally, I think there are two things that just spring to my mind immediately about what more could be done. I think just the effective sharing of ideas from teacher to teacher about good strategies that are working in their classes and having a forum for that district-wide would be really helpful and awesome. And then the other thing is just when we know there are pockets of kids, like the kids that I have or other kids, to be able to provide them sort of systemic time or additional para support within the class period is what jumps to my mind. But
That's great. And if others want to talk, can you just briefly describe what you mean by a bell ringer?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's when the bell rings every day. I have a series of problems on the board that are what I would consider foundational and structural supports for the things that we're learning within that unit. And the kids, it's a routine to get us started right away so that we don't lose precious time at the beginning. But it also morphs quickly into kids sharing ideas and kids having conversations to start the class period. So, and then, I do it where those are actually assessed and we see, like, did we make progress on these specific skills? And if we didn't, well, then we need to try something else. The goal obviously is that we do, and that we can sort of put that into the, yep, we got it for now category.
Thank you.
Mr. Barlow.
So my question is very similar to Dr. Piquel's. As I looked at the Minnesota Standard for Mathematics, I'm going to read just a small sentence from the standard. It says, the standards are placed at the grade level where mastery is expected, with the recognition that intentional experiences at earlier grades are required to facilitate learning and mastery for other grade levels. That isn't always the case where that mastery is occurring. In part, Jake, you have answered that to some degree, but I guess I'm concerned. I have engaged in conversations with parents who are frustrated. They know their children aren't doing well in mathematics, and yet they're promoted to the next grade. And they continue to struggle and struggle and struggle. They eventually graduate, yes, but not necessarily proficient at. And I'm not suggesting you may have the solution for that, though. If we were to reduce it to some type of mathematical formulation, we might come up with a solution. Though Jake and I have visited JM last year. He and I spoke with Principal Johnson. I sense then and continue to hear your passion. And I think that is so important. I believe each of you possess a passion. And so my question now begins, how can we ensure that not only as it relates to content area, but that staff who are passionate are provided the opportunities to a 2-block period, provided the opportunities to really invest and to cultivate and develop what they know is there, not only in the 20 or so students that you may have opportunity to see, but in most learners. I'm curious to hear what maybe we can do to be more supportive of that. I do know that we can't necessarily continue to do things the way we always have. That 18 times 5, I'm a traditionalist. So I multiplied 18 times 5, okay, 90. And I was kind of surprised that these other rounded, broke it down. But you don't know what you don't know. And yet what I saw there was an opportunity to challenge teachers and students to not necessarily do it the way you've been taught or the way that is convenient or that the scope and sequence may call for, but to maybe view there's an alternate way and approach. And so can you, I know I kind of went across, but is there something you can maybe share that will allow me to rest comfortably?
I can share one thing that I think has made a huge difference for our new math teachers, and I think it's that idea of being able to see one another teach. So we've been able, this year we haven't had the demonstration classroom up and running because of COVID and the subs shortage. But before that, we were able to have teachers, take teachers to a classroom like Jake's or a classroom at Gage where they're implementing number talks and let the teacher watch what that looks like and what that process feels like for students. And then they're able to debrief with the teacher afterwards and talk about how did you build that bell ringer? What information did you get from the students? What are you going to do next? What will you, what's your plan for the week after that? And I think being able to unpack some of that thinking so that teachers can see that and then, okay, I'm going to go try it. And now I want to come back to you and talk through how it worked or didn't work. I think that has been really impactful as we think about growing our teachers' ability to do that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but.
Maybe on the student level, just to speak to, we have kids who are behind. They show up in 9th grade and these are students who we're working on at the beginning of the year, students with gaps in their 3rd and 4th grade math levels. We take them as they are, right? We take every student and they're in intermediate algebra. This is why the time aspect is so important for those kids. Because they do have more standards that we need to see them build. And that's why I'm so happy to have that intervention proactively at John Marshall for kids. Because, right, without that, it's like we're just sweeping it under the rug and pretending like everything's fine, when in reality it's not fine, that they're mathematically damaged at that point. And we need to assist them in both how they see themselves, but also the skills that they can present in sort of that fluid way. So I think the more proactive interventions that we can provide for kids at a building level that get out in front of it and say, it's not that you can't learn math, it's not that you're bad at math, which by the way is something that is perpetuated in society often is, well, you're either a math person or you're not. Right? We believe that everyone is a math person and can be. It's just we need to get ahead of it before it becomes a failure mindset that, oh, I'm just not good at this. So I think one thing that could be done and should be brainstormed is more widespread use of proactive interventions for kids in math that are focused on both mindset and skill, I think would be good.
Well, and it's good to hear that it appears you have the autonomy at your school, and I'm guessing at most schools, to try stuff. Maybe getting kids together, smaller class sizes, 2 hours, great teacher. Let's try that and see how it works. And I think the schools are different, and I love it that you're trying stuff.
So again, I appreciate these detailed presentations. You talked a little bit about how the instruction has changed, and we also talked about how the adults in the room might have had a different experience with math in the past. How have what parents see coming home in terms of homework changed, and what can parents expect to see as your instruction is changing in the class? Or maybe just give a shout out to what the best way parents can support their kids at home to be strong, have a strong math identity, as well as learning the skills of math.
I think it's about education of the parents just as much as it is about the teachers and the students. And so I think along the way, you have to share with with parents that it may be different than the way that you were taught. The way that you were taught isn't wrong or incorrect. It's just that there's other ways to do it. And so not to stifle students into thinking that this is the one way and the right way and the only way, but to let them explore how did you solve that problem? Because kids often have that thinking, but then we often squelch it by saying, I'm going to show you the way to do it on the board, and then that's implied that that's the only way or the right way. And so I think letting kids explore with manipulatives, with lots of things early on, helps them build their confidence, like Jake said, which is so important, that they feel confident as a math student, and not to stifle or to funnel them to think that there's one way of thinking. I think that parents need that education just as much as the teachers and the students do. And I think just as many opportunities as you can give to tell parents, there's lots of ways to do it. Let your kids explore it. Let your kids show you how to do it, and be open to that and not thinking there's like this one rigid way. So I think that's important for parents to know just as much as the students and the teachers.
Are there particular ways that you already practice that? Because I'm imagining like just the students sitting in the room feeling like they are not a math person rather than developing that identity. I imagine one or both parents probably feel that way too. And so if you have two people with not a strong math identity in the room, and it's sort of like they're just kind of bumping into each other, where like, I just learned now today in school this one particular way and you learn this other way, and how invalidating to the parent to now not be able to help their kid, like how do we help them without them obviously sitting in the classroom with you to learn this new way of learning?
So I've got a couple things on that. Number one, to me, that's the beauty of the exit ticket. And when I say exit ticket, that's the thing that I need you to know before you leave. And I take it very seriously as a professional, and I think we all do and should, that my job is to make sure that you know this before you leave today. Because that just in itself tells the student that their presence in the classroom matters, and that them knowing this before they leave matters. And how we get there, based on conversations in the class, can vary, right? So that's that. We don't need one rigid way. There might be 3 ways, 4 ways to get there, but we're going to get there. And I think if we send that message to students that it's just, we can't accept anything less than you understanding this. You can, I can't. We're on the same team against ignorance here. When we think of it in that way, then the kids can't possibly accept any other option than, I got it, right? I knew what I had to do before I left the class. And I think that as a parent, then you have a kid who's coming home who knows what they need to do. They've got that confidence. I think it would be relieving as a parent to not feel like they have to fill that void, especially if they have math anxiety already. So I think the biggest thing that we can do as educators in math is use the class time that we have with the kids as effectively and wisely as possible. Every single minute has to count, because whether we like it or not, a lot of times we can't count on parents from day one to say, oh yeah, well, I can help you with that. So I think that's how we can empower parents, along with the conversational pieces, but certainly using that class timing and having the kid feel like and know that they are an expert on what we worked on that day is probably the most empowering thing we can do for kids.
Right, because like I'm just anticipating the idea that once the kid outpaces the parent in terms of confidence in math, and as a parent, like not being able to provide assistance, like, hey, I need help with this problem, and they're like, I don't know, and even if I let you sit there and explain it to me, I don't understand the new way that you learn to do this. Then in there creates an additional tension of them being, holding that confidence of being able to move forward. So it's not really just the logistics of understanding how many ways you can solve a math problem. There's also like the psychological barrier that we're dealing with, both like for 2 people in a room, and then it turns into like, okay, now you older sibling, can you help younger sibling, because I don't understand as a parent how to do this. And then there's a widening gap there.
And Dr. Pichel has a question too, but I just want to build on this quickly. Absolutely, attitude, confidence, whatever, but how about if you're somebody like me and you're trying to help your kid or your grandkid, and it's not about confidence. I just don't know. How do I do this, Grandma? I don't have a clue. So my question is, and I said, where's your book? He said, well, there's no book. But there are all these videos online, and that's what he had access to, so we watched it together. And then I was much smarter than I had been 5 minutes before. So, to me, that's huge, is having resources for people like me who just don't want to know, but just don't, and online or books or whatever. Dr. Pichel, sorry, jumped in ahead of you.
No, I'll be brief, and it's less of a question than just building on what Dr. Garcia said. I have a friend who founded a nonprofit, and you can Google them, called Power My Learning. And this is not a commercial for their nonprofit, but it's this insight. And it's technology embedded work, and it starts with math between the teacher, the student, and the parent or guardian. And the basic idea is when the student is taught the skill, the teacher also, using a tablet, introduces to the kid an explanation and application of that skill that the student then goes and uses the tablet to teach their parent or guardian. And the parent or guardian has a separate module they look at to sort of, so they don't feel stupid, because there's no.
That's what I'm like, wow.
Right, no, but it's just so powerful when it works, and it all depends on, like everything, how the teacher uses it. But you're teaching that skill, and then you say, okay, when you're going to go home, you're going to be teaching your person, and these families can be very diverse. You're going to be teaching them about this, but it's really carefully crafted so that it's a guided presentation for the parent of what I learned. And the parent has their own kind of module, so they don't have to know the math. And it's really magical when it works. And I was doing research on relationships at the site, and I said, at the time, and when I was talking with Liz, I said, have you ever studied what happens to the relationship between teachers and parents and kids and parents when you have this connection around the content? She said, no, but we know it gets a lot better. But, they'd never really looked at this idea that I come home and I teach you something I learned. We all know that what's the old saying, you really want to learn something, you have to teach it. So it's a really kind of genius insight that they had. So you can Google them, but I don't think we need to do anything with their platform to take this insight that I really appreciate Director Nathan for raising. Like, how are we helping parents? Because we got a lot of math fragile, math phobic parents out there. How are we helping them kind of support their students in this journey?
And so at the elementary level in particular, heavily at the primary level, our current curriculum, Everyday Math, which is very focused on equitable practices within their curriculum. But one of the key pieces that I have seen a lot of as a parent when my own children going through school is a home link that comes home, and it leans heavily on game-based learning as opposed to, so you can play with that when the directions are included in those materials. So that's another resource that we do have access to. That's a great opportunity to connect with parents at home.
Thank you so much.
We could do this for another hour, but you have other things to do. Thank you. This was really, really interesting. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go on to a resolution that involves math. John Marshall bid package number 2. That's the number that comes after 1. Dr. Patel.
Directors of the board, you will not be surprised. I want to ask Executive Director Scott Sheridan, Director of Operations, to come and present the board with this resolution.
I think is that on now?
Yeah, there's just one now.
I have another math problem for you to spend about $20-some million. Let's go through that. Huh? As you know, the John Marshall Indoor Air Quality Project was on the long-term facility maintenance revenue plan, the 10-year plan that was board approved last in July. The project is about $39.7 million estimated to be for John Marshall High School. It's about a 340,000 square foot building, and it includes the replacement of all the boilers, which are the original boilers in the building from when it was built in 1957, I believe. And we're going to redo the dehumidification equipment, a lot of the electrical. We're going to place the curtain wall on the front of the building that is leaking considerably, and that's on the east side of the building. And it's all going to be funded through some general obligation bonds. Knudsen Construction is the CMA for it, and as you know, you approved bid package 1 on, I don't remember when it was. Oh, I'm sorry, October 5th of 2021. We put together bid package 2, and that went out on November 22nd, and this includes the glass and glazing, and that's all the curtain wall that has all the aluminum front along with all the windows. Also, we put out a package for the plumbing and heating, ventilation and air conditioning, HVAC, and then we also put out a package for the electrical package. All of these were best value proposals. On December 28th, we received the proposals. We got 1 for glass and glazing, 2 for plumbing and HVAC, and one for the electrical package. These were all blind rated by members of Construction Services and Facility Division for risk assessment, team expertise, and value adds. And then on the 4th, we conducted interviews with the one vendor for the glass and glazing, the two vendors for the plumbing and HVAC, and one vendor for the electrical. And they were individually rated and scored as well. The purchasing manager keeps track of all the scoring. In the end, Hench's Glass was identified as the best value contractor for glass and glazing. $1,747,991 was their package. EMC Plumbing and Heating was the best value contractor identified for the plumbing and HVAC, and the amount was $13,746,000. Egan Companies identified as the best value electrical package in the amount of $4,557,700. There were 3 alternates that we're holding off on. Alternate 1 includes HVAC and ceiling replacement from Area 4B and 5. Area 5, if you remember, was the newer Science Wing that was built in 2008. So we're reviewing if that area really needs the upgrades, or if we can just correlate it in with the current, or with the new system that we're putting in. We're going to decide on that one at a later time. And then the HVAC and ceiling replacement in the kitchen, that was a fairly recent remodel as well when they redid the cafeteria. So we're going to wait on that to decide if we need to do that alternate as well. And then alternate 3 is to replace the emergency power generator. And again, we'll wait on that one. So the total estimated cost of the bid package, number 2, is $20,051,691.
Any questions from board members? Mr. Sheridan, is this something you'd like to get resolved quickly or not?
I would appreciate it, yes.
Okay, this is a briefing item.
Move to action.
Second.
And moved and seconded to move this to action. Ms. Severson, I forgot your name. Ms. Severson, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Director Amundson.
Aye.
Director Barlow.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Marvin.
Aye.
Director Nathan.
Aye.
And Director Workman.
Right, it's now an action item. Be it resolved, the School Board of Independent School District 535 does hereby accept the best value glass and glazing package proposal 8B from Hench's Glass in the amount of $1,747,991. Plumbing and HVAC package proposal 22A from DMC Plumbing and Heating in the amount of $13,747,000, and electrical package proposal 26A from Egan Companies in the amount of $4,557,700, for a total of $20,051,691 for John Marshall High School IAQ improvements bid package number 2.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Severson, roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Director Amundson.
Aye.
Director Barlow.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Marvin.
Aye.
Director Nathan.
Aye.
Director Workman. Thank you.
The resolution passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. 8.02 Superintendent Search Firm Planning. This is simply a announcement that at 4 o'clock next Tuesday, we will begin our study session with an hour-long planning meeting with HYA Superintendent Search Firm. This is just an introduction to how the process is going to be, and hopefully we'll come up with the timeline. 8.03 Board meeting dates and times through the end of March 2022. These are included in board docs. Note that we have a study session beginning at 4 o'clock next Tuesday, and then we will have a 3 meetings scheduled so far in February, but all the dates are there.
Chair Marvin?
Yes, ma'am.
Just to remind the community that after that initial hour from 4 to 5 on the 25th, at 5 o'clock, we'll be talking about the budget reduction information, and we'll also be having a presentation on possible referendum scenarios from Ellers.
Yes, thank you. The 5 o'clock study session was already on the books, and so we're just bumping it, starting at 4 o'clock with another issue. But thank you, Ms. Nathan. All right, 10.01, recent changes and updates to the annual board meeting calendar. Ms. Nathan.
So since the last update you received on the annual calendar, we just announced adding that 4 o'clock start time for the study session with our superintendent search firm. We'll be having a public hearing for field trips on February 8th, and then on February 22nd, we'll have an agenda item to approve the field trips. On April 5th, we will have the approval of PSEO payments for spring semester. And on February 8th, we'll also be having our diversity, equity, and inclusion update. And on February 8th, we will have the introduction of our new research assessment and evaluation. What is the title? Director. We'll also have recognition on February 22nd of the Computing Competition Awards. And on the March 1st agenda, we'll have an agenda item on antenna service systems at 4 schools. So what we plan to do at these updates, board members, is to give you all the individual updates of things that have changed. And then Ms. Severson is responsible for maintaining the master document, which is always available on board docs and also linked through our website.
Thank you. So this is completely accessible to the public then.
The data was changed.
Good. Okay, thank you so much. Other business, are there any other items that you would like to see considered for a future agenda? Mr. Barlow.
Well, just clarification in terms of this coming Thursday. Could you speak briefly to?
Yep, and I'll cover that briefly, the listening session.
Right.
Yeah. So the community knows at 7 o'clock, they can still register for a listening session with board members, and the entire agenda for that is for people to let us know what they're thinking, provide that information to the board member, and then to hopefully to allow some discussion within each small group for the people who are there. Thank you. Any other items you want considered for a future agenda? All right, hearing none, it is 8:06 and we are adjourned. Thank you.